What's going on, guys? Dr. Andrew Fix back here from the Code. Thanks for joining me on this podcast episode today. We've got a fun interview lined up for you guys. I've got my friend Dr. Roger with Move Athletics, another physical therapy practice out on the East Coast, out in Massachusetts. He's also an educator. He's getting into the continuing education side of things, teaching physical therapists and clinicians how to be better so that they can be better for their clients. So, Roger, thanks for joining me, buddy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Man, my pleasure. We've been planning this, you guys, for quite a while. Getting two busy clinicians and people that are trying to run practices schedules to line up with two time zones difference is not the easiest thing to do. But here we are, and thanks again for tuning in. But Roger, why don't we do this? Can you go ahead and more thoroughly introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, sure. Excuse me. So I'm a doctor of physical therapy, and I'm a two-time fellow, which if anybody listening cares or wants to know, it's just like the highest level of post-professional education you can get. But what even led me down that road is I'm a Marine Corp veteran, got into fitness when I was in the Marine Corps. Got out of the Marine Corps, started coaching in a CrossFit gym and Olympic weightlifting, and lots of just fitness things, and I realized that people weren't getting the help that they needed around here. Like there was nowhere for athletes to go. They were being told to, stop running, stop lifting, stop jumping, don't do that, it's bad for your back, don't do that, it's bad for your knees. And they would have lost like I don't know, 100 pounds, some of them or more, and they've been off of all of their diabetes medication, cholesterol, like all of their metabolic disease symptoms were disappearing, and they're getting off their medications, and their doctors and PTs and chiros were like, just stop fitnessing, it's not good for you. And I'm like, that's not the answer. So that's what even got me into PT. And then when I got into PT, I realized that I had no idea what I was doing, and a lot of people don't know what they're doing. And the system was broken, and I was just overrun with 3 to 4 patients an hour in the insurance world, and I just couldn't give good care. Even with all the advanced training, I was like, this is terrible. So then I woke up one morning, and I had a conversation with myself. I was like, man, I don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, what do you mean you don't want to do this? What is it that you don't want to do? And I was like, you don't want to help people? Like, that's your whole job. It's kind of messed up, right? If you're saying, like, as a human, you don't want to help other humans. I was like, that's not it. And I realized I didn't want to do it that way, right? I needed to figure something else out. So then I just drove to work, gave 3 weeks notice that day, and decided I'm going to figure out how to open a practice.
Yeah.
And that's like a quick introduction about me, right? I have 2 kids. I live in Western Massachusetts, and I'm into teaching other PTs how to stroke out the process themselves as well, right? So they don't have to struggle with their confidence in their treatments and their, feeling unsure if they're doing the right thing by their patients, and having frustrated patients and not knowing that they've gotten the right testing and the right information to be able to stay the course and not be confused and not do disservice to their patients, instead of having to struggle and figure it out along the way. And that brings us to present. Here we are. Yeah. 4 months later after trying to plan this podcast.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate again you being here. And you guys, I just want to hammer home that point of like what Roger said. He's been a coach. He was in the Marines. He's a father. He did a fellowship twice. And now he's a business owner. And now he's about to become like a coach or a mentor, teaching other providers how to do it better. He's extremely qualified to be talking to us today. And what we're going to get into is one of the things you said, I want to just have you touch on a little bit more. But after that, what we're going to get into is, start sort of talking about how to prioritize things, how to prioritize what's important to us so that we can actually do the stuff that we want to do. And like you're doing right now, you said you decided, you had that conversation with yourself to leave what you were doing, and you prioritize something else that you were more passionate about so that you could go in the direction you wanted to. But you started to explain what you meant about the system being broken in healthcare. And you said, I was treating, multiple patients an hour. I had this awesome skill set, but I still wasn't able to really utilize it and feel like I was able to truly help my clients get better. So just expand on that a little bit more, because I think you and I talk about that with people pretty often, about how the system is broken. And but what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I just mean like as a whole, we don't really have a healthcare system. It's more of a sick care system, right? You go to your doctor, and a lot of things that could be fixed with nutrition and sleep and sunlight, movement gets prescribed a pharmaceutical pill, and then people wonder why they're sick and in pain for long periods of time. But even like if we make that more specific to how the physical therapy industry typically works, you go to your primary care and you talk to them. They are, no disrespect to the primary cares, but they're not qualified to be giving orthopedic advice, right? They're more of a triage to then deal with the common ailments that you might have, colds, things like that, and then send you off to the person that is a specialist in whatever area, right? Oftentimes that leads to them sending somebody to an orthopod, right? An orthopedic doc, a surgeon, to get some images, or in that office, that day they get some x-rays. Because if you go to your doctor and they just say, oh, you need to go see this other doctor, you feel like they've done nothing for you, and you wonder, why did I come here? So they give you x-rays. Maybe, yeah, you can justify saying it's to rule out red flags, but really it's to make you feel like they've actually done something so you don't waste your time. So now you've wasted your time, you've wasted your money, you've been exposed to radiation for no reason, right? And then they send you off to an orthopod, who then tells you that you need to go try physical therapy and fail it for 6 weeks before insurance is going to give you the MRI that you really need so you can get the real answers. So then people get sent off to physical therapy, right? After months of waiting and multiple appointments and spending a ton of money and wasting their time on literally nothing. Then they go out to physical therapy, but they have the mindset of, well, this is just something that's not going to work, that's in the way of me getting the thing that I actually want. So the system from the beginning has set patients up for failure.
Yeah.
Because we know from science and studies that there's many orthopedic surgeries that don't work any better than placebo, right? Like meniscectomies 5 years out are the same as conservative treatment. Like they've actually studied this, Scandinavian studies, where they've done things like, hey, give you a laminectomy, give you a meniscectomy, give you a shoulder surgery, or not, just cut into you, sew you back up. So there's a blinded, you don't know if you've got the study or not. And there's no difference in the outcomes of whether they actually did the surgery, or they just cut your skin up on the scalpel and sewed you back up, which is crazy, right? So then people go into PT with this mindset of like, well, I can't actually get the thing that I need because this is just an obstacle that's in my way. And then they are almost proven correct at that point because of the way that it's set up. It's not like, in the traditional rehab setting, you go in and you get one-on-one time with your patient. I was seeing 3-4 patients an hour. Every hour, actually, I would have 4 patients scheduled to come in at the exact same time that have exercise techs, aides, right? Kids in college with literally no formal education, that are actually running you through your rehab protocol, progressing things like completely inappropriate. We had a 30% cancel rate, and they would book with the expectation that we would have a 30% cancel rate. So that means they would book 7 people on my schedule in an hour, expecting it to get canceled down to 4. So there's times where I would see 7, 8 people in an hour, right? And how do you can't give good care there. People just get lost in the system and they just become a number. So when I say the system is broken, I mean, it's not set up in a way for you to be able to get the healthcare that you deserve, period, right? Like I was just talking to somebody yesterday on workers' comp that is, it's its own animal, workers' comp, like insurance at work and all this stuff. But like they get approved, they have like a massive accident and they get approved 6 visits at a time. So they go for 6 visits and they're going 3 times a week. So they get approved for 2 weeks of visits. And then there's a 2-week gap where they're not getting PT because insurance hasn't approved it yet. And now where they should have been better 4 months ago, right? They're still in this pain because of just such inconsistencies of insurance getting in their way over and over again. It's like at this point, they feel like they're just going to live the rest of their life in pain. And as I'm talking to them, I'm like, that really doesn't have to be that way. But right, people also don't necessarily have their priorities in order, right? Like we were talking about, like, how do you prioritize things? Like, yes, you, in that situation, you want workers' comp to pay for it, right? I totally get that. But at the same time, if you're not getting the care that you need, this is your life. Is it more important for you to be able to enjoy the rest of your life and have quality of life and be able to spend time with your kids and run, jump, squat, lift, your like play with your grandkids, be there as a human? Or is it more important for you to have insurance pay for your healthcare? Which blows my mind that people actually make the decision of like, no, I'd rather have insurance pay for my healthcare. It's not doing this job, but I pay for insurance. So I'm going to prioritize that over actually getting the help that I need, which is crazy to me because we see it all the time. And I'll have conversations with people because I'm real big on perspective. I don't know, I've focused on the wrong things in my life plenty of times that have left me, not where I should be or where I want to be. Have left me in pain, like physically, emotionally, right? Because I'm focusing on the wrong things or letting the important things like my health slide for other reasons. But when people tell me that it's like, oh, well, I can't afford to come and see you. But they live in America. They have $1,000 cell phone in their pocket. They have a brand new car. They went to college and they didn't pay cash for that. It's like, you can, right? Like if your car broke down and needed a new transmission, what would you do? Right? Like it'd be weird because you would find the way to fix the car, right? Or you'd find a way to trade that car in and get another car, all of which takes a transference of money. So if you're telling me that you can find $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 tomorrow to fix your car, but you can't find it to fix your body, all I hear is that your car is more important than your health. But it's a priorities thing. Like people just have their priorities all mixed up.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that because one of the things that I've heard you say many times to other people or on social media or something is like, if you do have issues with your car and you're going to take that in for somebody to help you figure out what is going wrong with it so that you can get it fixed, are you going to bring them your actual car so that they can look at it? Or are you going to bring them a picture like an MRI of your car and then expect them to treat it based off of what that picture says, right? Pictures don't tell us a whole lot. You need to actually drive the car, move it around, take tires off, look at things, assess it like we would do in the office, not just take snap pictures of it, of you sitting still like in an MRI tube, not actually moving when you have the symptoms. And my wife and I just dropped her car off at the shop this morning on the way here to work. So then she dropped me off. She drove my car back home and she's going to pick me up later because she needs some work done. And that's not my area of expertise. And I don't want to be laying on the floor in the garage trying to figure out what's going on with her car all weekend long when someone else who's an expert that I can pay to do it in a fraction of the time is going to be able to take care of that for us. So
yeah. First of all, I get it. It sucks, right? Like you don't spend money in your car. That's the worst. But also just my experience, the same thing, right? My experience of spending the whole weekend laying on the floor in the garage, trying to figure it out, watching YouTube videos, or back in the day, looking at Chilton's manuals before YouTube was the thing. It's like in the end, it's cost me way more money, a shit ton more time, and half the time I've got to like take it to somewhere to like get it done correctly anyway. So like, yeah, that's okay. Like break something simple. Still took me a long time, right? And then I was like, I don't know if this is safe when I first like started doing it because I was just kind of guessing about how to do it, which is crazy now that I think about it in hindsight. But that's what people do with their health too, right? It's like I love that analogy of like the car and the MRI. Because I think it just makes so much sense, right? People are like, well, here's my MRI. I've got a herniated disc, right? I've got a torn meniscus. Well, that torn meniscus, that herniated disc, that doesn't tell us anything, right? Like I love to tell people about my MRI all the time. If you take an MRI of my spine, I have multiple herniated discs, right? And I have what's called a spondylolisthesis. For everybody that's listening, doesn't know what that is. It's where your spine is fractured and slipped forward. So one vertebrae is fractured essentially off of the next and slipped forward. And that sounds extremely dangerous, right? And that's why I love to describe it that way. Because when you look at it in a picture and you hear about it, like, ooh, that's not good. But guess what? I'm totally fine. I run, jump, lift, squat, do whatever I want, whenever I want, like however I want, because I know how to take care of things. Like it's not a death sentence, but if you look at a photo, it can be very concerning. Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing with photos, right? It's like when you look at yourself in the mirror, right? Like I don't freak out that I've got all this gray hair and a bald spot in the back of my head and all these wrinkles because I've been watching that stuff happen for years, right? When you take a picture of your spine, it's like you're looking at the whole history of your spine, right? If I woke up and I was 16 years old and I had wrinkles and this bald spot and a bunch of gray hair, that would be very concerning, right? Because all of a sudden it's there. I haven't been like you haven't been looking at your spine every day for your whole life. You have no idea how long it's looked like that. You don't know what the progression has been. Your spine could have looked like that for the last 20 years and you have no idea. Yeah. Right. And then after you have like after your pain goes away, you take another picture of your spine or whatever it is, like, hey, it still looks exactly the same, but now you don't have pain. So obviously the stuff in the picture can't be what's causing the pain. It's the sensitivities and the irritations around it and the inflammatory processes and like the way that you're moving, right? And like if you have knee pain, like, yes, sure, you have knee pain, but you probably have a hip and an ankle problem, right? Because the knee is primarily a hinge. Yes, it moves slightly different ways, but usually it's flexes and extensors, like that's its primary focus. For ankles, that moves a lot more different directions. Your hip that moves a lot more different directions aren't doing their job. Who's going to pay the price? That thing in the middle, you know?
Yeah.
Pictures don't show that.
Yeah, pictures definitely don't show that. And, right before we hit record on this, you and I were talking about a client that I saw literally yesterday, less than 24 hours ago, with this exact scenario where this young lady came in with pain near her knee, and their knee is not the issue, right? Her ankle wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. Her hip, her low back are not doing what they're supposed to do, and her knee's paying the price for it. And she can't run, and she wants to be able to run before, for mostly mental benefits, more so than the physical side of things. And she's very passionate about it. So we need to get her back to running, but it's not going to be by treating her knee, right? So let's parlay this conversation kind of down this path of priorities, because we were just talking about, how we should prioritize taking care of our health because it's our life and we only get one of those, right? But a lot of times we prioritize other things like money or having our health care be covered by our insurance or our car, or our phone, or something more than our body that we just get one of. But all of us only have 24 hours in the day, and we've got a lot of other responsibilities to do. And you're a great example of somebody who you're trying to run a business. You're trying to start another business on the continuing education side of things. You have children that you're taking care of and responsible for. You have a home, you've got a car, you've got a significant other. So I guess without asking like too specific of a question, walk us through how you, having a super busy schedule, as do all the people listening to this, how do you find a way to balance all of that and to structure all of that in a way that allows you to be able to do the things that you need to do, prioritize the thing that you need to prioritize, and still take care of yourself?
Yeah, well, if you show me your calendar, I'll show you your priorities, right? Like I heavily use my, which is bad because if you look at my Google Calendar right now, honestly, it's mostly work, right? Like there's not a lot of family time booked in there right now, and there's not a lot of time of fitness time booked in there right now. I'm in a season of grind where sometimes like life comes in seasons where it's a little bit more work focused, right? And then other times there's going to be a lot less work focused. So I think first recognizing that like pure work life balance and like focusing on everything equally all the time, I think is impossible. I think you have to grind it sometimes. You can have freedom later on, right? Like there's been plenty of times where I've sacrificed, time with the kids to be able to grow business, work on things, which has then later on set me up to be able to pick them up from school every day, drop them off to school every day, be able to leave and take time and do all of their school events. But if I didn't have that period in the beginning where I was maybe sacrificing a little bit of that, right, with the long-term foresight, then I wouldn't be in the situation that I'm in. I think a lot of people are going to hear that. They're going to justify doing that over a long period of time. But another guy we know, Chad, I just saw something on his Instagram this morning where he was talking about work-life balance, and something that's super helpful for him is like he put up a video of his kid's reaction when he picks them up from the school bus, right? Like how excited his daughters get, and just the pure joy that you can see, right? He's like, he records it and he's doing a voiceover, and like that stuff is very motivational, right? If you have a family, if you have kids, to like be present for them and see their reaction, like watch that, and that's going to drive a lot for you. But how do I actually do it? I plan everything in advance. What do they say? Proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance.
Oh yeah, man, so, I heard some of that stuff from my college football coach so often.
Yeah, and it's like I look at my schedule and I plan out the next day. I've tried to do like this block schedule where I'm like, this is going to be what my schedule is every day, and this is when I work out every day, and this is when I'm going to do this every day. And then like life happens, shit falls apart, the kids get in trouble at school, something happens with an employee, like whatever, if there's car trouble, and it just doesn't work out that way. So I look like I have a general plan for the week of where I want to do things, But every night before I go to bed, ideally before I finish working for the day, so that way I can like shut down and be present, I plan out the next day. I write down all the things I'm going to get done in the morning, right? Because I get up early. I have like some get shit done time, GSD, where I just get shit done that otherwise wouldn't have time to get done, right? Whether it's busy work for the business, high level stuff like for the new business, planning, like whatever it is, that high level tasks that need to get done without any interruptions. When the rest of the world is asleep, I get that stuff done then. And then I plan out like, all right, what does the day look like? Where do I have patients? Where do I have meetings? And I just put in like what I need to where it needs to go. So I'll have, this is my GSD time. I wake up, it's in the notes app on my phone. This is the stuff I'm doing. Don't go on Instagram. Don't do anything. Just like get right to work. And then I already have it planned out. Okay, if I have time here, like I'm gonna work out here. And I put it all in my calendar. And that's exactly how I operate. If it's not in my calendar, then I completely forget about it.
Yeah.
Because I'm busy, right? Like I can't remember. It's bad. I can't remember to do things. Like if you tell me something, I have to write it down. I have to put it in a checklist. I have to put it in a calendar somewhere, so that way I know to do it. Like I've got on a Google Drive doc, I've got all the to-do tasks, right? I've got my checklist. I literally have a checklist of like, this is the stuff I need to do in the morning. This is the stuff I need to do in the evening before I go to bed. And I primarily use them when I'm building new habits, right? Checklists for me are huge. If I'm like, hey, I want to start adding in a sauna and a cold plunge, I'm like, I'm already super busy. Where am I going to do this? Like, all right, this is going to be my like morning checklist, right? Get up, get out of bed, get in the cold plunge, spend 3 minutes in there, get up, get right to the GSD list, right? It's like boom, boom, boom. And it's the consistency and the routine that is super helpful. If I have a night where like I stay up late, like we've been watching The Witcher. I don't watch a ton of TV, but every once in a while I'll get into a show, right? Like Kayla and I have been watching The Witcher on Netflix. If you guys haven't heard of it, you're welcome. Go watch it. But like if I stay up, they're hour-long episodes. If I stay up and watch another episode, and instead of going to bed at 9:30, I go to bed at 10:30, it's like the next day sucks, right? Like everything is thrown off. So, and even on the weekends, if you go to sleep at 9 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock, whatever it is on the weekday, and you stay up an extra 3 hours on the weekends, you're throwing your whole schedule off. I mean, you've got to readjust. It's like I try to have consistency and predictability in my day-to-day life as much as possible. Get up at the same time, do the same shit when I get up, go to bed at the same time, like do the same stuff before I go to bed. And it's the habits that allow me to make sure I get the important things done. And I didn't always have that.
Yeah.
When I was building the business in the beginning, there was multiple years where or even when I was going through my fellowships, right? I didn't prioritize the right things. I did miss out on a lot of my kids' lives when they were little because I was prioritizing the wrong things, right? Like I was young, I was still trying to like have more of a social life and do all this other stuff. And I was like, hey, guess who paid the price? The small children at that point, right? Which makes me ashamed to say it, but it is what I've done, can't change it. So just own it and do better in the future. So that's the time when I prioritize the wrong things. I slept 4 hours a night for like on average, like averaged it out for over a year, which in case you're wondering, leaves you extremely tired, very irritable, moody, falling asleep at red lights when you're driving. Like that's dangerous stuff. Like I didn't prioritize the sleep because I was like, oh, I want to do this and I want to do this. And I put that down. And guess what happens to your health when that happens? You end up injured. You end up getting sick more often. You end up gaining weight. That's not good. And then even building the business, even being a health fitness centered company, right? Working with athletes, like I stopped working out regularly because I always had so much other stuff of like, all right, the business, this, and clients need this. And it's like, it feels very overwhelming. And it feels like you need to do all of the things that all needs to get done right now until you start actually putting it in perspective, right? Like I started putting in a lot of work on just self-growth, right? Just like as a human and self-development and focusing on what's really important, right? Like business, is that important? Absolutely. But business can bounce back. If my relationship with my now 13-year-old daughter deteriorates, what happens then? Right? Like, is that something that's going to bounce back? No, that's something that if I don't have the time and the effort, I'm not actively prioritizing that, that's going to be something that either suffers for the rest of my life or her life, or it's going to take a very long time to rebuild. Yeah. Right? So now I look at what are the things that are stressful, right? But like, what's the worst thing that happens if my business completely fails, right? Like, yes, my employees got to go find new jobs. guess what? They're all well qualified and can fucking find new jobs. Sorry for swearing. Like dropping the F-bomb. That's cool.
We'll be all right.
Sorry. I can go get a job. Like, what's the worst thing that happens? You know, it's not that bad.
Yeah,
So
you're basically talking about that conversation of, you're juggling rubber balls or glass balls, right?
Yeah.
Like, and if you drop one of them, is that something that can bounce back, like a business, like finding a new job? I've had that conversation too of, obviously I want to remain here at Physio Room. Chris and I and the team, we're trying to build something really special. If shit hit the fan, all of us could go find new jobs. There's plenty of people that need physical therapists or something else. We have skill sets that could do something else. We could go coach, we could go teach, we could whatever. Or just, find something if necessary. But if your health deteriorates to a certain point, trying to get that to bounce back is pretty damn hard to do, right? You might dig yourself an unbelievably deep hole that trying to fill that is going to be a whole lot harder than you digging it in the first place. Or relationships, like you said, those are things that once they hit a certain point, trying to mend that is, man, it's really hard. And it never quite goes back to what it was when it was perfect before it got broken.
Especially relationships. Those are some of the hardest things. And I've definitely had relationships where I didn't put the like intimate relationships where I didn't put the effort where it needed to be, right? I left somebody feeling neglected, and guess what? Those relationships are no longer, right? And on the health side, like, I get that, right? You're busy, you don't have time to do this. Like, there's all the excuses, but really when it comes down to it, is like, you just haven't felt enough pain yet, right? Whether it's physical pain or inconvenience pain, to overcome the pain of actually making the change and prioritizing it. Because everything is painful. Everything comes with a cost, right? Like, yes, it's painful to spend money. It's painful to take the time and to do the exercises or prioritize or to make the changes that you need to make, whether it's lifestyle, habit, or like just doing your rehab, right? But it's also painful to slowly deteriorate and not be able to do the things, right? Like, it's painful when you're obese and you have to live in a nursing home later on because you make the painful decisions earlier on of like exercising and controlling what you're putting in your mouth. Yeah. It's painful to me because I had, in 2015, I crashed a motorcycle quite spectacularly. I broke my arm, I broke my wrist, I broke my shoulder blade, I collapsed 3 out of 5 long lobes, and I shattered my shin bone. And I've got a rod from my knee to my ankle. And I went through a lot of rehab, right? Yeah. And I've always had this little weird calf thing that pops up every once in a while. But I was like, no, rehab, I'm not doing it anymore. And it was pretty good for years. And then it actually got worse and worse and worse. And then I would just rehab it a little bit, just to where like it didn't really bother me that much. And then I would stop because it didn't inconvenience my life so much. But what does that do? That just puts you in this endless pain cycle of like, it's not so bad, it's really bad. It's not so bad, it's really bad. And then you got to the point where I couldn't run. Mm-hmm. I couldn't even walk, right? And I just let it keep going because I was so focused on my business. It still bothers me. I'm still working on it right now. Yep. And it's been almost a year, a lot less bad, right? But because I ignored it for so long, my calf actually shrunk to being like half the size of the other calf. And putting actual strength and muscle size back on like that takes time. Yeah. Like, it was so bad that it hurt. I couldn't walk at a normal pace without somebody asking me what was wrong with me. And I just neglected it, right? I would exercise, I would fitness, I would do all this other stuff, but I just didn't have the time, quote unquote, to do the extra rehab because it wasn't that bad. Until my daughter, we were hiking, which hurt every step. But my daughter was like, hey, can you give me a piggyback ride? And I couldn't. Like, I physically couldn't take a step and support my weight and hers on that leg. Yeah. Without falling. And then that was the moment where I was like, now this is painful enough for me to like want to change it. It's not the physical pain. It's like the emotional pain of that, right? It's the way that's affecting my life. I could have avoided all of this if I would have just done the damn thing years ago when it first started bothering me. Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. Well, and you were talking about this, in the context of calf muscle, but it's the same thing. What, generally speaking, of course, there's exceptions. What you put your focus and attention on is going to grow. Is that you're putting focus on your muscles in the gym and you're growing size. You're putting your focus on the people and the relationships that you have, and then that flourishes and that grows. You're putting it on your business.
you're putting it on trying to get more sleep, and then you wake up feeling more rested. Like whatever you're putting that attention on is going to grow. And I like that what you said is, for pretty much all of us, this idea of perfect balance all the time and having this like perfect circle of our life is almost impossible to do. Life has seasons, and in those different seasons, there's going to be a shifting of priorities to different things, whether that's like, as my wife and I are about to embark on, in 10 weeks or less, we're going to have a baby, right?
Yeah.
And the focus is going to be on keeping that tiny human alive and prioritizing time with ourselves and time with the baby and taking care of him and taking care of each other. And sleep is probably going to suffer, right? At least this is what I've heard from every parent I've ever met is, wow, you're going to be lacking some sleep. So that's what we're expecting. And as a byproduct of that, though I'm going to still try to continue to focus on my fitness is going to change just a little bit with the lack of sleep. And my training is going to have to be strategic, right? If I'm feeling terrible and I've had several nights of terrible sleep, well, the next day is probably not going to be the day that I try to set a deadlift PR, right? I'm still going to train, but I'm just going to be smart about it and shift what I'm doing and shift my focus, because I have some education on how to do that. I love what you said about show me your calendar and I'll show you what your priorities are. Because if you're putting things on your calendar, or if you were to go back in time and create a log of like what you did, well, the stuff that you write down is obviously what you're prioritizing at the end of the day, because actions speak a lot louder than words do. And one of the things that helped me the most try to be efficient with my time, and you mentioned you get shit done in the morning and stay off of Instagram and make a list of like what you need to do, is turning off the unnecessary notifications on my phone. Right?
Yeah.
I do not receive a notification when I get an email because I get so many damn emails. I don't want to get a notification every time because then it would just distract me and interrupt me 100 times throughout the day between like 3 different email accounts, some coming in for each one every single day. I have times throughout the day, morning and afternoon, that I try to check my email and respond to things in a timely fashion so that I'm not like leaving people hanging. But I'm not like in and out of my email folder on my phone all day long. What I try to do, though I don't do this all the time, is I try to only address emails from my computer, not from my phone, so that it signs it with the signature that I want it to send it with, not like sent from my iPhone. And it stops me from accidentally like clicking on something, reading it, but then not actually addressing it. And then I forget to respond to that person. I've started using this feature on the phone of leaving text messages unread so that I don't forget to respond back to people. And if I see it come through, but that moment is not the time where I need to prioritize addressing that, I leave it unread so that I can get back to that person later and I don't forget about them. But I'm busy doing something else right now that if I don't stay focused on this, I won't get it done. And then the to-do list is just gonna keep growing and growing and growing. You're not gonna actually get things checked off. Then you're going to build up stress and anxiety about trying to get that done. Then you can't sleep. And, I don't know. It's putting things on the calendar, like you said, has helped me significantly. And we were having this conversation, some of us at Physio Room, around the topic of fitness and exercise. Because though it's not a like written down requirement per se on the on the contract for someone to work here, kind of like an unwritten requirement that you have to have something recreation or fitness related that you do, that you like to do. Because if you didn't, you'd be like the only one on the team that doesn't exercise regularly and practice what we're trying to preach to the clients we're working with every single day. So whether that's the person that is answering phone calls, sitting at the front desk in one of our offices, what we call a client experience specialist, whether that's a personal trainer, massage therapist, physical therapist is the largest bucket of our staff members, you have to do something. So, whether that is on your schedule before work, after work, during lunchtime, like whenever you need to get it done, well, that part's up to you and what you need to do that day. But man, it's got to be on there somewhere. And if it's not, what we've found is if you go too long of a season of ignoring the exercise, the fitness, the taking care of yourself, that starts to negatively bleed over into the other things. Because what, like you've said, you went through this journey of like personal growth and development. What we found is when you focus on taking care of yourself, it only betters all the other things that end up coming along.
Yeah, it's so ironic. I completely agree, right? Like, so when I was focused on business and trying to make all these changes and, money and growth and all this stuff, uh, things weren't that great. I reprioritized on myself and my fitness and my health and taking care of myself. And it's like weird. The business is also improving and the relationships are improving. And it's like you can't pour from an empty cup,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah. It's I like what you're saying about it being strategic fitness after baby comes, right? Like that's so important. Most people are like, I'm gonna keep doing the exact same stuff. So you could, right? But it's kind of the best idea. You might
Yeah.
need to train a little bit less volume, less intensity. There might be some days where you're like, you know what? I'm exhausted. I'm gonna walk for a few minutes, and
Mhm.
that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like what I talk to people so much about, exercise is, whether you're traveling, whether you're having children, something that's like adding stress to your life in other ways is the body is still feeling stress, right? It doesn't matter if it's stress from not sleeping, it's stress from work, it's stress from other things, from eating like shit. It's still stress to the body. And when we're going to potentially sustain an injury, it's because our capacity exceeded our tolerance for something, right? The capacity of the weight of your bicep, the weight exceeded it and you ruptured your bicep or whatever that might be, the disc in your back, right? The weight and the stress that your body was feeling was too much for what your body was able to handle. And now we have an injury. But, when we can continue to keep the consistency, that to me is like one of the biggest goals of any, like if you're traveling for work and you're just on the road, great. You don't have to like tear it up every single day in the gym. If you just do something and you keep that habit and you keep that part of your routine in place, it makes it so much easier when you are having a better day, when your energy's better, when you're not traveling from work, you can get right back into your normal flow of things because you didn't lose the habit when shit was hitting the fan.
Any That's true for anybody that's accomplished anything large, right? Whether that is a shaped physique or a well shaped business or amassing a large skill set at whatever it is, it's that consistency over time, right? It's like doing things, like not letting your mood dictate your actions, right? Never let how you feel dictate what you do, because once you start moving your body, then the way that you feel changes, right? Like if I only worked out when I felt like it, I would never work out, right? Like rarely. I rarely am like, you know what? I'm in a super mood to work out, especially when I'm stressed and the kids have stuff going on and the business and da da da. It's like, all right, I don't really want to do this, but I'm gonna go do it. And then at the end of it, it's like, oh man, I feel so much better, right? Like I don't want to do the rehab for my calf. Now that I've been doing it for a long time, I'm like, man, I wish I did this sooner because it is so much nicer not walking around in pain all the time, being able to run after my kids and pick things up and carry them around like children, you know?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
So, so tell me about now. I know you said you're sort of in like you're in a season where you're grinding hard, business wise, trying to build this Con Ed. In a normal circumstance, in your schedules, like normally how you have it, what time are you typically like going to bed and then waking up to get shit done? I think you said you go to bed like 9:30 or something like that.
Yeah. So it depends on what the kids have going on. On
Yeah.
a wrestling night, it's a little bit later, because I still want to prioritize the family time with them. So, like, if they go to wrestling and wrestling gets out at 8 o'clock, supposedly it's like 8:15 by the time they leave there. 20 minutes to get home, right? Then they got to shower and all that stuff because you're gross, everybody else's sweat all over you, right? And then sit down and eat dinner as a family, like maybe a little bit later. But there's pretty much dinner, talk about our day, catch up. And then we have this little thing we call 2+1 that we do at dinner, where it's like you have to go around the table and say one at a time. Like it's cumulatively two things that you really enjoyed about your day and one thing that you appreciate about somebody else at the table. So it's like I would tell you one thing I enjoyed, you would tell me the one thing you enjoyed, and we just go in a circle.
Yeah.
So we go through that, which opens up conversations about the kids' days a lot. So sometimes it goes on for a little bit because I don't want to stop it. But those nights might be a little bit later. But I mean, ideally, I'm getting ready to get to bed by 9 o'clock. I'm in bed by 9:30. So things are like shut down. I'm planned out for the next day. And when I say around 9 o'clock, 9:30, because with the kids, I don't know, they like to come in there and like say goodnight. And like sometimes it takes a little bit of time because it's so like more little family bonding. At this point, they come and tuck me into bed. When they go, they're 12 and 13. Like they come into my room, say goodnight, hang out my bed for a little bit, and then go. And it's usually about 9:30 is the goal to like be in bed, lights out, like ready to go to sleep. And then typically 5 a.m. 5 a.m. is when I get up.
Yep.
There's some play in there. You know, if I have more stuff to do, I'll get up at 4:30 or 4. There's a really big difference between getting up at 4 and 5, though. Like, so I prefer not to do that. But on those days that I know that it's going to happen, you know, I kind of weigh the options of like, all right, am I more productive if I do some things now, like later at night after the kids go to bed, or should I go to bed now, get up a little bit earlier? If I get to bed a little bit earlier, get up a little bit earlier, I find for me, I'm more productive then. Those are like my magic hours. Trying to do things in the evening doesn't work. So yeah, like 9:30, 9:30 to about 5 a.m.
Yeah.
Sometimes 5:30 if I'm tired.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar. Mine tends to be like 9:30 to 5:30. And man, like you said, there is such a big difference on 30 or 60 minutes off on that. Like, you know, you said you don't watch a ton of TV. You mentioned that show. What I like to watch is when I can, live sporting events, particularly football. I'm a huge football fan. So the other night I was staying up watching Sunday Night Football, which in the Mountain Time Zone, not too bad. I still go to bed right about 9:30. But I was watching this Texas versus Washington college football game the other night. Well, that thing didn't start till 7 something over here. I got to bed at 10:30 because I was watching that game. And then I woke up for work the next day, had my normal 7 a.m. client, and woo, that 1 hour less of sleep. Man, did I notice that. But I'm right there with you. I tend to feel personally a little bit more productive in the morning. So if I have to make a trade-off on that, like, okay, I have a little bit more to get done, I need to either go to bed a little later, wake up a little earlier. I tend to choose the wake up a little earlier option as well. And part of that's because of like what you said about the dinner time and stuff. Like I'm hanging out with my wife in the evening and soon to be our son. I don't want to stop that part to then dive right back into work stuff. And then I got the screen in my face and stuff. And then I try to go to bed because I feel like my mind is going, I have a hard time going to bed. I'm like, well, I'd be better off. I just make a little list of like, this is the stuff I'm going to do in the morning so that I'm not thinking about it as much, trying to fall asleep. I set the alarm a little earlier, wake up, get ready, do my normal routine. And then I typically will just arrive at the office a little sooner because then there's no traffic driving over here and I start getting shit done before the clients arrive. So that's the route that I normally take. And I'm glad that you shared that because what I have found is, there's so many books out there that talk to you about this stuff. There's so many things you can find on the internet. But what I find resonates with people more, and hopefully this is true of the crew that's listening to this episode, is they like hearing the examples of what other real people are actually doing that are dealing with the same shit that they're trying to deal with.
Yeah.
They can hear different examples from different people and try to figure out what works for them. So yeah, hearing your routine is good.
I think that's a key too, right? Of like figure out what works for you. Because I've definitely gone the route of like, oh, this person says to do this person says they do that. Like I'm gonna do what they do. I'm gonna do what they do. And I've tried so many different things. I've had big morning routines and short morning routines, and it's like simplicity is great, right? Like whatever works for you. Like I tried getting up and journaling and doing this and doing that. And it's like, cool, I'm up for 90 minutes. I've got nothing done. That's all the time that like I actually use to be productive. So for me, it's like, I've got to get it done. I'll take that stuff. I'll do that other stuff another time. But in the morning, like that's a priority. I think personally for me, the more important things are, I want to get them done first, right? Because there's no fires happening that are going to get in the way. It's like, all right, this is the most important thing I got to do today. If I get it done at 5 a.m., I get nothing else done the rest of the day. Cool. I got the most important thing done that I got to do all day, and that's it.
That's right. That's the way to do it. And I think that's another thing too that I've learned to try to do is I'm a big like list person. I'll list out all the stuff that I need to do. And previously, I didn't prioritize that list at all. I just started working through it, right? And sometimes it feels good to like check the little things off, but a lot of times those are not the very important things. It's like, oh, send this email, oh, do this, where like I could do that tomorrow or even multiple days later. But if I spend literally just a couple minutes prioritizing that list and saying like, okay, here's priority number 1, 2, let me do those 2 things first. And then when I finish those, okay, then I'll move on to what the other priorities are. And that has made such a profound difference for me of not feeling like I'm looking at this list. I just have so many things to do. Not all of them are as important as the other things. So like just pick the one or two most important, knock that out, get the biggest hurdle out of the way.
Yeah, I like what you said about turning off the unnecessary notifications on your phone. I actually turned off all the notifications on my phone for a while, but then I realized that I was missing like calls and texts from the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I'm gonna get to it when I get to it. But something I picked up from Ed Milet is he talks about how everybody has that friend that they know that if they text them, they're not gonna get back to them for a couple of days. Or like if I text you, maybe you get back to me tomorrow. Or I know that if I text John, like I'll hear from him in a couple of days. And you train people to expect things from you. Like you train people how to interact with you. So if you're that person that gets a text and you respond right away, you're training people that you're going to respond right away. But that pulls you away from so much, right? Like I love what you said about only responding to emails from your computer, because if you're opening text messages and responding to emails, like then your brain starts growing. Then guess what? You're not there with your family. So Ed, something that I picked up from Ed is there's 2 times a day where he responds to messages. Right? There's one time in the morning, they text, email, whatever it is. One time in the evening, and there's like priority levels of like things I need to get back today, things that I can get back to you tomorrow, things that like aren't important, I'll get back to you in a couple of days.
Yeah.
Since I've adopted that, like it saved me a ton of stress and allowed me to be a lot more present. And honestly, like the things that before I'm like, I need to get back to this right away, I get back in a couple of days, and there's no issues. Like all the issues that you have about that, it's in your head.
Yeah. I think what we feel about it is different than what the person we're actually responding to feels about it. They know that we have stuff going on.
Well, even things like, all right, so super extreme example that some people might disagree with, but like if my kids got hit by a bus, it'd be terrible, right? But if I find out now versus I find out like 2 hours from now, like it doesn't change the outcome of what's happening, right? Like it's terrible. Like I would want to know sooner. Like let's clarify that before anybody gets upset, right? But it's like me knowing anything right now versus me knowing, like if my mom has a stroke right now and dies, and I find out right now, like versus me finding out in 6 hours my mom had a stroke and died, like it doesn't change the outcome.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's an extreme example. Absolutely. Both of those are, right? But like if you look at anything like that, it's like the fire that you have right now that is not that big of a deal. If you get back to it now, it's like, what's the worst thing that happens? I guess you could argue like, yeah, well, you could get there and you could see people and you could do this. Like, in those extreme examples, yes. But like that email that you have right now that like somebody's upset or whatever's going to happen, it's like, it'll be okay if you don't see it till tomorrow.
Yep. Yeah, you're totally right. And I think sometimes just having a random extreme example like that helps put things in perspective, right?
Yeah.
And, well, I know we're up against it. Roger, you've got a client at the top of the hour. We're pushing it here. What I want to make sure we do is wrap this up so that person's not waiting for you. But before we do that, I want to make sure that if something that you said resonated with anyone that was listening to us today, how can people get a hold of you? What's the best way for them to reach out, whether it's website or email or whatever would be the best way for people to find you?
Yeah, look me up on Instagram. I'm pretty active there. It's doc.rog, just DOC period ROG. You'll find me there.
Awesome. He'll be active on Instagram. We'll put that in the show notes. And of course, you can find all my information in the show notes as well, for the code or for Physio Room. And if you have questions, comments, concerns, snide remarks, please put those in there. Let me know about them. And if you have topics that either we started to get into, but you would like us to go deeper on, or if there's other things that came to mind, man, it would be awesome if you drop a comment, drop a review on there, and share that with us so that we can get an episode out on that or have a conversation with you about it. But Roger, I really appreciate you joining me today, man. This was a fun conversation.
Yeah, thanks. It was great.
Yeah. Well, you guys that listened to the code, we hope to catch you on another episode. If this was your first one, thanks for joining us. And if it wasn't, thanks for coming back. But we'll catch you guys on another episode of the code. See you later.
Boom.